I recently finished playing through the entire Trails series in just a few months. I don't even want to think about how many hours I put into this series. It was honestly kind of like a time machine. One day, I casually started Cold Steel 1, not really knowing what I was in for. Then, in the blink of an eye, all 9 games were completed. Today, I'm going to attempt the difficult task of trying to rank all of these games. This is of course my opinion only, and I'm sure that many of you will think differently. From what I've seen, I know that there are many different opinions out there, so I would really like to know how you would rank the Trails games that you've played, so let me know in the comments. I'm also going to try my hardest not to specifically spoil important plot points for you, but as these games are all directly linked, just seeing gameplay footage from certain games may give some minor things away. Before we begin, if you like this video and the Trails series, it would help me out a lot if you hit like and sub for more RPG and Trails content, as I've got reviews up for each game and will be releasing more Trails content soon. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, this is where things all began for me. The fact that a game as awesome as Cold Steel 1 is last on the list just speaks volumes about the quality of this series. Perhaps a large reason as to why I have this game so low is due to it being my first in the series, and one of the best things about the series for me is having the world continually expanded on. Seeing my favourite characters return from previous games and seeing how all of the arcs interrelate is just so amazing. This just wasn't the case with Cold Steel 1, as it was my first experience and the first of the Erebonian arc. I was also just getting used to the slow pace of Trails storytelling, something that I eventually grew accustomed to as I played through the whole series. From a gameplay perspective, its combat mechanics, while still a lot of fun, did evolve for the better as the Cold Steel series progressed. Even though it's so low on my list, I love Cold Steel 1 and it hooked me. One does not simply complete Cold Steel 1 and then go play another game. I needed more, so I went on to play Sky FC because I knew that this series was worth experiencing to its fullest. Zero no Kiseki, or Trails from Zero, is the first game of the Crossbell arc, and unfortunately it has still yet to be officially localized. A team of volunteers that go by the name of the Geofront did release an unofficial patch, which is excellent by the way, but the fact remains that this game isn't easily accessible for the average gamer. Zero is set between the Sky and the Crossbell series and set in the state of Crossbell. Crossbell City acts as the main hub and the entire game takes place here and in its surrounding areas. I thought the Crossbell setting was great, as its main city is not only huge, but it was also full of personality, with each different district having its own feel. As with all of the debut games in each arc, the pacing was slow as it slowly established the conflicts and built up the large cast of characters. This time there are 4 main characters that you'll control through the entire game, as opposed to the massive roster in Cold Steel, and characters constantly coming and going from the Sky series. This means that a lot of time is dedicated to fleshing out the main cast, and this is something that was done very well. One of the reasons that I have Zero so low is due to the underwhelming main antagonist, who was the weakest in the series. Zero also doesn't end on a crazy cliffhanger like some of the other debut arc titles, but its themes and plot threads do continue in its sequel, Ao no Kiseki. If game developers ever want a lesson in creating cliffhangers, then they should look no further than the Trails series. While not my #1 cliffhanger in the series, the ending to Cold Steel 1 was still incredible, and I couldn't wait to see where the second Cold Steel title would take things. I know that Cold Steel 2 often gets its fair share of criticism due to its pacing and padding, but I personally loved how the engaging narrative from the first title was expanded on and how we continued to learn more about Class 7. It took everything I loved about Cold Steel 1 and gave me more. Some of the characters that were introduced in the first game really had their time to shine and created some fist-pumping moments. One of my issues with Cold Steel 2 was the lack of new areas to visit. Most of the locations were reused from Cold Steel 1, and this was a bit disappointing. And like I said before, nothing really happens a lot of the time, particularly early in the game, but it's not like this issue is exclusive just to Cold Steel 2. Trails in the Sky FC was the first Trails game of the Liberal arc and also the first Trails game released. Here, we follow 2 protagonists, Estelle and Joshua, as they travel around the country to become senior bracers and also solve the mysteries of their father's whereabouts. In terms of pacing, Sky FC hit an all-time slow, and this is the reason that many people may not rank this game highly. It takes a long time to get going, as much of the game is focused on establishing the main conflicts and also introducing the large cast of characters who come and go as the game progresses. stresses. But here, the world building is done to perfection, and the time that you are forced to invest in learning about all of these things eventually pays off tenfold. I mean, let's just name a few of my favorite characters in the entire franchise. Estelle, Joshua, Oliver, Lue. This is where they were all first introduced. However, the one single factor that puts this above the last few entries for me was the ending. Boy oh boy, wowee, that cliffhanger, the best cliffhanger in the series. My jaw dropped and I was genuinely in disbelief, worried about the futures of Joshua and Estelle. That is why I love this game so much. Oh, and it has a great soundtrack. The more that I played through the series, the more I really grew to appreciate this game, and it's definitely risen in ranks over the last few months. Sky the Third takes a step back from the epic conclusion to SC with a brand new plot. You played the role of Kevin, the traveling priest from Sky SC. I thought he was a pretty awesome character then, but Sky the Third actually made him my favorite character in the entire series. Any other Kevin fans out there? Basically, Kevin is dispatched by the church to recover a mysterious artifact. This leads to him and Rias being sent to another dimension known as Phantasma, and the game revolves around learning its mysteries and trying to escape it. While the story here is very interesting, my only issue is that it is much more insignificant on the grand scale of things than every other game in the series. There are also only a few new locations to visit, with most of them being taken from the past two Sky games. I think my favourite thing about Sky the Third is the doors. Basically, when you're travelling through Phantasma, you can enter through doors provided that you have certain characters in your party. These doors provide insights into the pasts of our favourite characters, and some of these are absolutely vital when it comes to getting everything out of the entire Trails series. These doors were the true standout here, and one that I'll never forget is Star Door 15, which looks into Ren's tragic past. I also felt that Sky the Third had the best gameplay in the Sky series. You not only have access to all of the characters from the past games, but the proportion of challenging and enjoyable boss battles were at an all-time high. Oh, and once again, amazing music. At number 4, we have Trails of Cold Steel 3. This one was first released on the PS4, and with that came significant graphical enhancements over the previous two titles. Once again, you play the role of Reen, but this time he's an instructor for the new Class 7. I really liked Reen's role change, and I also found the new Class 7 to be full of interesting characters. The narrative structure returns to the field trip style from Cold Steel 1, but this time we get to visit new locations that we haven't seen in the past. One of my favourite things about Cold Steel 3 was their trip to Crossbell. After playing through Zero and Azure, it was awesome seeing the city of Crossbell in 3D, and returning here was a highlight to me. However, this is also where knowledge of all the previous arcs is highly recommended. Many of the characters, concepts and story beats directly relate to the events of the Crossbell arc, so you'll be missing out on a lot of context if you skipped playing these. I also felt that the combat mechanics reached a series high. It took everything we loved about the past two Cold Steel games and then added new core concepts in the Brave Orders and the Break mechanic. My only issue here is that it is way too easy to abuse the system, making every single battle a cakewalk. As any sequel should, Ao no Kiseki or Trails to Azure took everything we loved about Zero and bam, made it better. The story picks up months after the conclusion of Zero, with some old faces joining the SSS, Noel Seeker and Wazzy Hemisphere. These two were the perfect additions to the already excellent cast from Zero. The cast of characters in Zero and Azure are very strong, and it's no surprise that many people consider this cast the strongest in the franchise. This time around, we learn even more about the kinds of people that they are, as well as their complex backstories, and this was a standout feature for me. In terms of story, while things were a little slow to start, the story eventually builds up into something absolutely incredible. Azure clearly steps things up from Zero by exploring the themes and questions we had from the first game, and also presenting a much larger conflict. The whole ending chapter was incredible. It was consistently mind-blowing, with so much going on and so many twists and turns. It was just brilliant, and this is why Azure ranks so highly for me. In number 2, we have the most recent Trails game, Cold Steel 4, which saw the end of the Erebonian arc. Due to playing this game later, I only had to wait a day between Cold Steel 3 and Cold Steel 4, but I feel bad for those who had to wait a year, especially after Cold Steel 3's cliffhanger. Everything finally came together, and Cold Steel 4's highs were some of the best in the entire series, such as seeing countless characters from all of the arcs finally unite. There were so many great moments here, but at times it was padded out way more than it should have been, and I found this particularly especially evident with Act 2. But still, I loved this game so much. It really did make spending hundreds and hundreds of hours playing through all 8 previous games so rewarding. It truly serviced the fans in so many ways. A couple of other standout features for me was the more balanced gameplay, which actually allowed me to enjoy this excellent combat system and the upgrades to the Vantage Masters card game. At number 1, it has always been Sky SC for me. Without giving anything away that may ruin the events of Sky FC, this time the story is focused on both Estelle and Joshua coming to terms with themselves and dealing with the major events that transpired at the end of the first game. SC took everything we knew about the first game and put it into overdrive with countless incredible moments that builds on our prior knowledge of the world and the characters within. I love the cast of the Sky games so much, and seeing how they continue to grow was a huge standout for me. SC also has some of the most impactful, memorable moments from the franchise, and this is why I rank it as my favourite Trails game. Oh, and the soundtrack is also the best in the entire series, which is saying a lot because Falcom seriously know how to music. This list was so hard to compile. I've done a few RPG ranking videos now, but the consistency and the quality here is just incredible. I mean, having Cold Steel 1 in 9th place makes me feel so bad, but one of them has to take that spot. How would you rank the Trail series? I have a feeling that this is something that will be different for everyone, so let me know in the comments. This was Hellfire RPGs, thanks for watching. If you like this video, it would help me out a lot if you hit like and also sub for more RPG and Trails content. I've got a review out for every Trails game so far with more videos to come soon, so stay tuned for that. See you next time.